out of town doing different things or not able to be with us for one reason or another. But if you're here as our guest, we're just glad that you are. And just if you can, stick around, let us say hi. And as already mentioned, good news for the college students is free lunch, man. You're going to love that. And so please, if you can, stick around, and right down the hall down there is going to be some good food and fellowship, and just join us for that. For the rest of us, we've got our small groups tonight, which they're currently kind of clustered together. All the adults will be in here, and our Elevate youth group will be back there. And so come. And so I just had a challenge. You ever had one of those bad timing moments? I did this morning. Just about 2 minutes ago, the lens popped out of my glasses. Anybody good at fixing this? Anybody want to take a shot at this so I can see? Would you? You work on that? And if you can fix it, I appreciate that. Here you pass. See if you can pop that back in there. So, because I'm not sure if I can read that or not without those. We'll see. All right. Depend on. But it's just the way things go, man. And I heard, and of course, I don't know if some people got here early today because of the whole time change thing. It's fun to watch. You know, if you forget to set your clocks back, you end up with an extra hour. As I was informed by the internet last night, that means when you set your clocks back, the time change means the preacher gets an extra hour to preach. So we ready? Everybody buckle in. Everybody runs screaming from the room. I was kidding, come back. But I'm just glad to be here, and I'll try to keep it under 2 or 3 hours. And so, you guys must believe me because you stayed. Thank you. Yeah, it's just like, hey, it's lunchtime. Preach all you want, and I will do an empty room. All right. I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, if you've been here or if you didn't know, on Fully Devoted. Out of this verse, because in 1 Kings, that's where Solomon is dedicating the brand new, amazing, awesome temple they had built. And he does this long, beautiful, elaborate prayer in verse 61. He prays that all their hearts of all the people would be fully, completely devoted to God. Man, that's a prayer that still needs to be prayed. That's a thing that still needs to be, shared, is that we could have our hearts. Basically, it's the idea of being all in, completely committed, not parceling out ourselves to God and giving him the spare change or the leftovers and say, okay, I'm all with you on Sunday for an hour or two, or here I am, but this part I'll give it to God, this part I'll keep for me. And he just says, give me all of you. And put all of your heart, all of yourself, all of your life, your agenda, your words, your thoughts, your agenda, just all of the aspects, all of the angles of yourself under his lordship, fully committed and devoted to him, and then let him take you and make you what he will. That's a whole different way of living, isn't it? That's a whole different way of thinking. That's kind of intimidating or scary to some people. They're like, I'm not sure I want to do that. That sounds too radical. But what I want to show you is, we looked last week at David and the devotion that David had. Man, that was a guy that was all in. There was no halfway with David, even though David was a flawed individual. You talk about a guy that messed up, and when he messed up, it was some world-class mistakes, wasn't it? His victories were over the top, so were his defeats. And yet through it all, he never gave God less than 100%. And we learn from his example. Let's do the same. Warts and all. Because none of us are perfect either. Oh, bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, there you are. Okay. Thank you. No. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Oh, there you are. Hey, you stayed. All right. So I want to look at for a couple minutes of some folks from the Old Testament and the lives they lived and what they can teach us, because it helps to have good examples. Remember, and we need those, don't we? We're like, I learned from Grandma about this. I learned from Uncle Fred about how to make this or do that. I learned from these people in our lives. So if you have some examples, we can draw from that. And so let's look at a few of these people. And here's why: because you look at ancient lives, these aren't irrelevant. These aren't just dusty old words of dusty old people and lives that have nothing to say to us. It's not just old stuff that has no relevance. The Bible is the most relevant document in history ever, including today and right now. Some people write it off and they say that's just an old bunch of stuff about something that happened on the other side of the world, has nothing to do with me. I disagree. Man, it has so much to say, everything to do with us. Let's learn from some of these guys. Here's a few examples, and this will be just a few, just a sampling, by no means. When God made the world, we see in the first 2 chapters of Genesis how and he made the world and what he did through power of his voice. Boom, and he made it. He said it was good. It was very good. He made everything right and everything pure and everything was awesome at the beginning. And he makes Garden of Eden. He sets a man and a woman and everything just starts out as the way God intended. No sin, no fear, no death, no shadow, no problems. Walking, fellowshipping with God in a special place. That's what God intends. And how long did it take us to mess it up? Yeah, didn't seem like very long, does it? You get 6 chapters into the Bible. This is the beginning of the 6th chapter. So how much time has gone by? Don't know for sure. Probably not less than a few hundred years of history has gone by. And look what we've done. Look how bad we've made it. We took God's pure and beautiful creation that was so awesome and just totally messed it all up. Have you watched the news lately? Have you seen what's happening? Oh, pick a corner of the world. Not just the Middle East. Look at this country. Look at culture. Look at social media. Look at 100 different possibilities. Look at Hollywood. Look at New York City. Look at Washington, D.C. Look at across the street and across the world. Man, have we messed this place up because we're sinful. We got issues, man. We're brokenness and sin. Well, Noah would, if you were to tell Noah, he'd go, yeah, tell me about it. Because this is a description at the beginning of Genesis 6 of how messed up things had gotten already. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of human race had become on earth. And look at this description. Look at the terminology there. Every inclination of the thoughts of the human hearts was only evil all the time. 3 words that give you a totality. Just everything was wrong. Everybody was messed up. Everything was corrupted and sinful. And so the result is God regretted. I think one version said he repented that he had made human beings on the earth. His heart was deeply troubled. Wow. Not looking good. And you continue. So the Lord, here's what God said. I'm going to start over. I'm going to wipe from the face of the earth the human race I've created, and with them the animals, birds, creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. I think it's in my Bible here, the way it's set up on the page. That and I've seen that if you go, it depends on what the publisher is and what. Yeah, right down at the end of verse 7, at the end on this Bible, you get down to the end of that. We've been reading from this text, and you get right down to the end, and it talks about how bad things are, like we just read, and it's in the page right here ends with, I am sorry that I have made them. God said, I'm going to wipe it out. Everything's wrong, everything's sinful, everything's bad. And it just seems to stop right there. Grim, hopeless, ruined. But I love the fact that you can turn the page, and the first thing you see when you turn the page, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And we turn that page, oh, but for Noah and his family, no hope is left. And so God tasks Noah. Remember, he tells him, I got a job for you, Noah. Because you're still faithful, because you're still mine, I need you to build a floating zoo. Now imagine, put yourself in his sandals, a ark. What's an ark? And I need you to make it out of this and do this. And here's the dimensions and here's the size. Why? Because it's going to rain. What's rain? It had never rained ever on the earth at that point. You know what he does? Okay. And they build it. And he tells them to get to work, and they do on things. And I'm sure scratching their heads going, what in the world are we doing? I doubt they understand it at all. And like maybe you've been told through the Word of God, things God wants you to do, things He wants you to believe, things to say no to, other things to say yes to. You may not have understood, still understood. Like, I don't know why I'm supposed to do this. Or, just go do it. Because God said so. At some point, devotion says that God's will is enough and it trumps my lack of understanding. We don't have to go, hold up, you got to explain everything to me, ABC 1, 2, 3, before I will do anything, Lord. Faith says, yes, sir. And you get to work. Sometimes you go to work when nobody understands because all of the other people around probably came up to Noah like, what are you doing? Well, I'm building an ark. What's an ark, Noah? I don't know. God said build one. Who? God. Why? Because it's going to rain. What's rain? I don't know, but God said it's coming. And they're thinking, you are the biggest idiot I've ever heard of, Noah. Imagine the neighbors. Imagine the town. Imagine all your associates, how they think you're just a moron. And it maybe doesn't even make sense to you. Will you use that as an excuse to say, I can't go any farther. Everybody's making fun of me, God. People think I'm an idiot. I'm starting to think I am too. Or will you just go anyway and do it anyway? That's what Noah did. And that's why he is somebody we need to follow. What about Abraham? Abraham his devotion was in the sense that he was willing to obey in the face of the unknown. Here's some things he wasn't told. He didn't get every answer at the beginning. Because in Genesis 22, as well as earlier in Genesis, we meet a man named Abram, and God selects him, and he takes him from his home in one part, and he says, I'm going to make a covenant with you. I'm going to bless the whole world because of you and your family. I'm going to turn you into the patriarch of what is eventually going to become this vast nation. Here's the problem. Abraham and his wife are already old, and they have no children. He's like, I got no family. How's that going to work? Got to figure it out. He just says, go. And so he tells him, I need you to move. But he doesn't tell him where. Imagine that this conversation, I don't know how exactly it would have gone. But he has to come home and tell Sarah, yeah, so God told us we're moving. Really? Where? Have no idea. So start packing. So props to Sarah as well, because she went along with that. And God tells him. And that's what we're told in Hebrews 11, verse 8, in that faith chapter. It talks about Abraham was called to go to a place he would later receive as an inheritance. He obeyed and went. That's just imagine what's behind those words. He obeyed and went. Even though he did not know where he was going. And what if God came to you and said, here's my will. Here's what I want you to do. And that's because he does via Lord of God. He says, I want you to repent. I want you to stop doing that sin. I want you to start doing acts of righteousness, or change it from this and do that. I want you to think differently. I want you to stop saying those kind of words, replace it with these kind. And so on it might go. Are we willing to go, why would he want me to do that? Will we follow him anyway, without perhaps all of the answers? Because faith says yes to that question. He did. And in Genesis 22, of course, as the years go by, God takes his time. And so by the time Abraham's around 100 years old, Isaac is born. And then some years later, when Isaac is likely a teenager, in Genesis 22, God says to take your son, your only son, go take him to the Mount of Moriah and kill him and sacrifice him to me. What? You want me to what? And he does. Or at least he would have. God had to stop him. With a broken heart and probably all these questions going, why? He's going to go through with it. So much that God has to prevent him. And he finally says, stop! At the last minute. Because there he was. Don't lay a hand on the boy. Don't do anything to him. Now I know, God says, that you fear God. Here's why. Because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Did Abraham love his son? Probably just as much as you love your children. And we know, don't we, how much we love our kids. We know we take a bullet for them. We know we would take their place if there was something that, we don't want anything harmful to happen to them. We will protect them with our own lives. And Abraham, I'm sure, no less than that. And yet, God says, if you love me even more than you love your son, and shows us this, that even those who are the most precious to you, the ones you love the most, do you love God more? Because that's what he seeks. That's what wholly committed does. It doesn't say love your kids less. It doesn't say you can't love your children. You can't love your parents. You can't love your spouse. It doesn't say that. It says love God even more. Do we? Abraham showed us what it looks like. Will we follow that lead? Then you go forward in time, a long time. Moses had become the leader, led the people out of Egypt, 40 years in the wilderness. At the end of that, he hands the baton of leadership of all this vast people to Joshua, who had been his servant. And Joshua is the one who will cross the Jordan and with them begin the conquest of the promised land. And wars and battles are fought. Some are lost and a lot of them are won, because sometimes they do it as God said, sometimes they don't, and they pay the price. But at the end of Joshua's career, when he is an older man now, he is standing before his people and he says this. This is the end of the book of Joshua. He says, as Joshua is speaking to the folks, and he says, now fear the Lord and serve him. Look at that. Totally committed. With all faithfulness. Don't give God just a part. Give him all of it. He says, throw away your gods and that your ancestors worship beyond anything that competes with your devotion to God. Get rid of it. Serve the Lord. But look what he draws this line in the sand and he steps over it by saying, if serving the Lord seems undesirable, then choose for yourselves today whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, me and my family, we will serve the Lord. He is saying, even if none of you follow God, me and my family will. Man, that's stepping forward. That's putting yourself out there and making a statement. Who would put this maybe online and say, you know what? If nobody else claims Jesus as Lord and claims they're going to give God their whole heart, I will. Are we willing to make a public statement or tell friends at work or at school, hey, you may make fun of Jesus, you make fun of Christianity, I'm going to stand for God no matter who laughs or counts me out or uninvites me to stuff. I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to do it. That's what total devotion, sometimes that's a price to pay, isn't it? Nobody enjoys that. Nobody wants that. We like to be liked and have friends, of course, but Joshua is willing to pay a price if there was a price to be paid. But nonetheless, no matter what, he's saying, this is what my family are going to do. Let's do the same. Now, Caleb was with Joshua. Remember, Joshua and Caleb were 2 out of the 12 spies that were sent in the book of Numbers to spy out the land before they went in. And the 10 of them said, oh, they're too big. There's big giants in the land. I'm scared. No, we can't do it. We're going to die. Joshua and Caleb are going, let's go. We can take them. God will give us the victory. The 10 paid the price for their lack of faith and their fear. They don't get to go in the promised land. Joshua and Caleb do. And he fully followed the Lord, not the crowd, because the majority of the opinion of the 12 that came back from the spying expedition, the majority opinion was, no, they're huge. The obstacles are too big. The cities with the big walls and the big, huge people, and we're scared. We look like grasshoppers to those people. That was the majority opinion. But Joshua and Caleb said, oh yeah, they're bigger than us, but so what? God's bigger than them. Let's go. God notices that. And here's what God says about Caleb. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit. See, he didn't have the same kind of thinking and believing and lifestyle as the crowd. And he follows me, there it is, wholeheartedly. The whole heart. That's why I am going to bless Caleb and I am going to reward Caleb. I will bring him into the land and his descendants will inherit it. God rewards wholehearted devotion. In this case, It was in that sense. For different people, it might be a different kind of reward, but God is aware, God notices, God rewards. Now, can we have a spirit like Caleb? Can I learn from Caleb to no matter what, even though the crowd goes this way? People say, you got to go with, have you heard that saying? You got to go with the flow, right? You got to go with the flow. I liked somebody's answer where they said, only the dead fish always go with the flow. True. Let's be Caleb. This is a picture taken in, I think, probably late 30s or early 40s Europe under the Nazi regime. This might have been in Germany or one of the surrounding countries that was under the Nazi influence. And a lot of times you've probably seen the documentaries, the footage in the movies, the pictures, where Hitler would go through, or the leadership of the army would go through, and here's these big shot Nazis with all their uniforms, and everybody would do the Heil Hitler thing with the arm and salute him. And this is an actual photograph. Don't know where, and I don't know who that guy is. But it was captured at some point. Here's all the people. You talk about the crowd. Well, if you're going to go with the flow says, Heil Hitler. And it's going to salute and agree with all of the evil of Nazism. Not him. He's like, nope. Now, he does that at risk of his own life. During that time, in that era, that could get you killed. That could get you thrown in prison or get you fired or all kinds of possibilities. A bunch of brown shirts could show up at your house the next day. Who knows what could happen and what price he might have paid. He's willing to pay it. Reminds me of a couple of guys in the book of Daniel, right? The decree, the law said, when the music plays, everybody down on your face and worship the golden image of the king guy there. And so the music plays, boom, everybody drops, and here they stand, 3 guys going, not gonna do it. Nope. Knowing good and well the price. And so they took a little trip to the fire, didn't they? They got in trouble, as they probably knew they would, sent to the furnace. And what happened in the furnace? 3 go in the furnace, they look, and there's 4 in the furnace. Not touched. Didn't even smell like smoke when they came out of there. Be like that guy. If the crowd says, Christianity is stupid, Jesus was just some guy, or if you give your whole heart to God, you're just a radical freak, man. I don't know what's wrong with you. Don't follow the crowd. Just because it's the crowd doesn't mean it's true, doesn't always mean it's right. Very often the crowd is wrong. Actually, more often than not, you'll see in Scripture, God always works with a minority. God always works through a remnant, which are numerically almost always quite the minority in size and in number compared to all the other nations, all the other people worshiping all kinds of other stuff. Take your stand and don't compromise. We see in Ruth, the book of Ruth, a lady that put family ahead of herself. This is what faithful devotion will do. In the book of Ruth, there's only 4 chapters, a beautiful love story. And it just teaches us so much about her. And she was a foreigner, and she was from Moab, and she married an Israeli fella who came to Moab, but he passed away. And she goes with her mother-in-law back to Israel, and there she takes care of her mother-in-law. And God rewards that faithfulness by introducing her to a fellow named Boaz. And because Boaz, and then God works through the children born to them, and she becomes part of the lineage, the genealogy of Jesus himself. And we see that because when her mother-in-law, they're going back, and her mother-in-law says, you know what, you're from Moab, go back home, go find a Moabite fella and marry him, because you just be with me, you'll be alone and single. She says, nope, not gonna do it. Look at the loyalty here. Ruth says, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. That's hardcore loyalty right there. The loyalty she showed to that, let's show to our Christian family and especially to our Lord. May that be the sentiment that is tattooed onto our hearts in relationship to Jesus. I will not be separated from you. I will pay whatever price. I will go wherever you send. I will do whatever you require. Not perfectly, but forgive me when I make mistakes, because I make tons. But let this be our heart's cry to our family here and especially to our Lord. Man, you learn about Job? Oh, man. In Texas, we would say, well, bless his poor little heart. Because Job was this great guy and he was wealthy and everything, but he loses all of it. Because we learn in the first chapter, there's this discussion between Satan and God, and he's like, sure, sure, that guy follows you because you made him rich. Okay, take it all. He'll still follow me. No, he won't. Yes, he will. And they take it all away. And he said, see, he still follows me. Oh, yeah, it's just because you've kept him healthy. If you take his health, he's going to cuss you in the face. No, he won't. Yes, he will. No, he won't. Yes, he will. And so they take all of his health, and he loses everything. He had a lot, lost it all. And after losing it all, it's amazing what he answers, because how many people have lost it all and they turn bitter and they turn angry and they blame God? Why didn't you prevent this? You could have stopped it. I can kind of understand that feeling and that sentiment. Job he doesn't do that though. He doesn't go there. And this talks about him. But in chapter 1, here's what he says in the midst of tremendous personal loss. He says, you know what? I showed up in this world with nothing, not even clothes. And I will leave this world, and I'm not taking any of it with me. The Lord gave, the Lord takes away. If it's his right to give, it's his right to take it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Whoa. Oh, that's easy to say. Or is it? How easy was it for Job? Oh, no. I can't imagine anything was easy at this point in Job's life. Nothing was. And yet he said it nonetheless. Do we see all the stuff that we have as belonging to God's and we're just merely stewards of it? Or do we say that stuff is mine? Job had more than we did, more than we do. And yet said, God gave it. God, if God has the right to give it, God has the way to take it. We know when God gives it to us, we're like, oh yeah, I'll take that. But if God says for whatever his reason, you got to give this up, we're like, whoa, hold the phone. No. You can't take that from me. And he's like, oh, but I can. If somebody is wholly devoted to God and we are his servant, he's the king and we're the servant, he's the master and we're the slave, and then that means whatever he wants to do, I may not understand it. I may not even agree with it. I may wish it was different, but I'll comply. And I will praise him, even when it doesn't make any sense. Wow, let's be like Job. And there's Elisha. During the time of the prophets, there was this guy named Elijah, and he started doing all these. Some of the prophets, they're kind of like speaking prophets. They write and they speak a lot of things, like Ezekiel and Isaiah and Jeremiah. But then there's kind of the doing prophets. You don't hear them say a lot as far as what's words that are recorded, but there's do a lot of miracles. That was Elijah. And then Elisha comes along and he says, I want to follow you. I want to be your, your intern, your understudy, the next, Elijah 2.0. And so he wants to follow in Elijah's footsteps, and Elisha has to make a choice at that point. Because Elisha apparently was from a wealthy family, because it says he had servants in his household, and he was with a span of, I think, 12 oxen. Dude, if on most people's farms then, you were lucky to have one cow or two pulling your plow. 12? He must have had a big old combine he was pulling, or something. And that's indicative of probably a well-to-do agricultural family. But Elijah comes and he says, I want to follow you. But look at what that required, or what Elisha was willing to do to follow Elijah. Elijah went from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat. And he was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. That's a bunch. That's a big setup. And he himself was driving the 12th pair. And Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. That's kind of when he throws his cloak around him, it's basically a shoulder tap saying, I'm choosing you. You come with me. And so look at verse 20. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. And then he says, I will come with you. He says, he accepted that assignment. Go back, Elijah says, what have I done for you? So Elijah left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment, cooked the meat, and gave it to the people, and they ate, and they set out, and he followed Elijah, became his attendant. It's kind of like that story, I think was it Cortez, that went from Europe, and then they were sailing back in the 15 whatever, I can't remember the year. And to keep his people from yearning to go back, to make sure their commitment was intact and total, what did he do? He burned the ships, didn't he? He set all the ships on fire, and he says, okay, we're here now. There's no going back. There's no going home. We can go that way, because that way is no longer available to us. The ships are burnt. And that's a statement of commitment. Sometimes what we do with our commitment is like, okay, I want to be committed to Jesus. We leave the back door open so that, if this doesn't work out, then I can just kind of like, okay, that was fun, but no, I'm going back here, and I leave my ships unburnt. When you give your life to Jesus, burn the ships. The past life, the before, the BC, before Christ, burn it down. It means you get to get rid of some stuff. You're going to have to maybe end some associations or some friendships. You're going to have to make some difficult choices. You're going to have to start doing some things and start doing some other things. And, there's just make some changes. They may be difficult, maybe really hard, but are we willing to do an Elisha and burn the plow? So that it's a statement of commitment. I am with you no matter what. Now let's be like Elijah. And last one, there's Daniel. Daniel lived in that time. In the book of Daniel, we see him. He was this greatly gifted, talented young man. He was one of the people brought to Babylon, and he was one of the captives. And so he's living in a foreign land. Has to work for the Babylonians. But God blesses him, and God uses him and his talents and his great thing, and he does well, and he goes up and becomes one of the counselors to the king. Well, that creates jealousy in the Babylonian guys. They're like, man, we don't want this Jewish kid taking our spot, man, or getting all the favor with the king. So they hatch the plot to get him taken out of the way, because they thought, this guy keeps, what he does? He prays every day. He prays 3 times a day. You can see him up there in the window of his house. He points his face toward Jerusalem, and he prays every day. And so they get the king to sign this law. It's a setup that says you can only pray to their God, and if you pray to somebody else, to the lion's den with you. So what is Daniel, knowing this law, what does he do? Prays, just like before. He doesn't let the changes in the law or the culture or the waves and the winds of popular sentiment, doesn't let that change what he does in his devotion to God. And he ends up in a lion's den. Now, I'm going to take a guess. Have you ever been in a lion's den? I bet that's a no. I mean, literally. But have you ever been in a lion's den? That's a yes, hasn't it? We've all been in our version of that, probably more than once. Maybe there weren't physical lions or tigers or bears, oh my, but there was something else. What if I was in a lion's den of brokenness or addiction or poverty or unemployment or struggles with my own self-esteem and my own view of myself and understanding and all? There's 1,000 possibilities. We all spent some time in the lion's den. I'm going to take a stab and say some of us are in one right now. What do we learn about that? From when Daniel learned the decree had been published, chapter 6 verse 10, he went home, went upstairs. He could have kept the window. He's like, he could have made this, he could have compromised and said, well, I'm going to keep praying. I'm just going to keep the windows shut so they won't see me because I'll get in trouble. Nope, did the same thing as always. Opens the windows, knowing the risk that is, and he prays just like before. giving thanks just as he had done before. Right is right, no matter who's watching. God's will is God's will, no matter what Facebook says, or Washington, D.C., or Madison Avenue, or Hollywood, or whoever else. And we learn that from Daniel. You may pay a price, but it's worth it. Doesn't mean it's easy or fun, but let's be like Daniel. And we could talk about others, but there's not enough time. You could talk about Moses. He failed horribly. He kept going, and God eventually sets him back. Sarah, just like Abraham, in the face of the impossible, she does it, and then God specializes in the impossible. He makes the impossible happen. Joseph is betrayed. You ever been betrayed? Joseph's own family sold him out, and he didn't stop being devoted. Esther looked at the possibility of risking her own life to go uninvited in front of the king. She does it anyway because it is what's necessary to save her people. The prophets, so many of them, paid a huge price. And so we could go on and on. So why do we study these folks? We just saw that in Romans 15 that Nick read for us. Everything that was written in the past was written to teach us. So that through the endurance taught in the scriptures and the encouragement they provide, we can have hope. And man, do we need hope. Look around, look out there, what's going on in the world these days. We need hope, and hope is found in Jesus. And so we've got to hang on to that. So we see this then. The devotion is in spite of. It's an anyway faith. It's an anyway devotion. Well, people are laughing. Yeah, be devoted anyway. Well, I don't get it all. It doesn't all make sense to me. I know, but be devoted anyway. It carries risk. Yeah, the people in the Old Testament going, oh yeah, it sure does, but reward, it's worth it. Devotion is fuel for a deeper walk with God. I want that. I bet you do too. And who of us have arrived at a whole wholly devoted? I haven't, but that's what I want to get to. That's what I want to get closer to every day. Devotion it's a lifestyle. It's complete trust, complete commitment, wholesale obedience. Just do what God says, no matter what. Devotion seeks knowledge, but it doesn't require every answer. Because God's not going to provide every answer, because the righteous walk by faith, not by sight. Will we be fully devoted? I hope so. The next Sunday, I want to look at some of the same kind of examples, but from the New Testament. See what some of those folks have to teach us as well as we continue to pursue being fully devoted. I hope you will. And so let's continue our pursuit of full devotion while together we stand and sing.
Days are filled with sorrow.